My wife's betrayal made me a national hero. Even now, those words feel surreal as they form in my mind like fragments of someone else's life that somehow became my own. 6 months ago, I was Daniel Cross, a 37-year-old cybersecurity analyst who spent his days hunting for vulnerabilities in government systems and his evenings in the comfortable silence of a marriage I thought was solid, if perhaps a little predictable. I was invisible by design, the kind of man who blended into office walls and preferred the glow of multiple monitors to the glare of attention. Now my face appears on news networks weekly. My book sits on the New York Times bestseller list. And strangers approach me in coffee shops with a mixture of awe and sympathy, as if I'm some sort of reluctant superhero. You want to know how it happened? How a man defined by his methodical caution became the center of a national security storm. It begins, as these stories often do, with the smallest of details, inconsistencies so minor that noticing them at all was both my greatest professional skill and, as it turned out, my most painful personal curse. It was a Tuesday in September when I first sensed the shift. Autumn in D.C. had arrived with its usual crisp certainty, and the Capitol hummed with the energy of a government machine returning to full throttle after the summer lull. I'd been working late, debugging an intrusion detection system for a classified project, when my phone buzzed with a text from Alina. Working late at the gallery. New exhibition set up. Don't wait up. XO. Nothing unusual there. As the curator for a prestigious private art collection with diplomatic connections, Alina often worked unconventional hours. Her career had flourished over our 9 years of marriage, her natural charm and fluency in 4 languages making her the perfect liaison between foreign dignitaries and Washington's cultural elite. I'd always admired her ability to light up rooms I found suffocating. I responded with my standard no problem. Leftover lasagna in the fridge and returned to my screens, where the clean logic of code offered a comfort that human interactions rarely matched. In retrospect, I should have noticed that her texts had been growing increasingly vague over the preceding months, the details of her whereabouts smoothed into generalities that offered no purchase for questions. When I arrived home that night to our Georgetown townhouse, something felt off. Nothing dramatic, just the subtle displacement of domestic rhythms. Alina's favorite wineglass sat in the drying rack, though she'd supposedly been gone all day. The corner of the Persian rug we'd bought in Istanbul was slightly askew. And her passport, which we kept in our fireproof safe alongside other essential documents, was missing. These observations registered as mere curiosities then. I was, after all, a man who prided himself on my compartmentalization abilities. I could spend all day tracing the digital footprints of potential threats to national security, yet somehow failed to apply the same analytical rigor to the warning signs in my own home. The next morning, Alina emerged from the shower wrapped in a cloud of steam and her favorite sandalwood scent. At 34, she remained strikingly beautiful, her dark hair cut in a sophisticated bob that framed high cheekbones and eyes that shifted between gray and blue depending on the light. She moved with the deliberate grace of someone comfortable in their own skin. How was the exhibition set up? I asked, sipping my coffee at the kitchen island. Exhausting, she sighed, pouring herself a cup. The Russian collection arrived late, and half the provenance documentation was missing. I had to call Petersburg myself to sort it out. I nodded, noting how she avoided eye contact while delivering this information, a tell I'd observed in countless security interviews with personnel hiding minor infractions. Anything interesting in the collection? Some stunning fabric pieces, she replied, suddenly animated. And a few avant-garde paintings from artists who disappeared during Stalin's purges. The kind of work that never leaves Russia. It's quite the diplomatic coup for the gallery. Her knowledge and passion seemed genuine. That was the thing about Alina, even when I sensed she wasn't telling me everything, what she did share carried the weight of authentic enthusiasm. It made doubt feel like betrayal. Will I get to see it? I asked. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course. There's a gala opening next Friday. I'll put you on the list. You know how I feel about those things, I said, already uncomfortable at the thought of an evening spent making small talk with diplomats and art patrons. Alina's expression softened into something between pity and frustration. Daniel, you can't keep hiding behind your screens forever. These people matter to my career. Just once, I'd like you to make an effort. The familiar guilt surfaced, the awareness that I was failing some essential test of partnership. Alina had always been the social one, drawing energy from interactions that left me drained. Early in our relationship, she'd found my introversion endearing, even mysterious. Lately, it seemed more like a disappointment. I'll try, I promised, knowing even as I said it that some last-minute work emergency would provide a convenient escape. She placed her cup in the sink with a little too much force. That's what you always say. I watched her retreat to the bedroom, feeling the distance between us stretch like an overwound spring. Later, I would recognize this moment as significant not for what was said, but for what hung unspoken in the air between us, a yearning for different lives than the ones we'd built together. The following weeks brought a subtle acceleration of strangeness. Alina's schedule grew increasingly erratic. Gallery events multiplied. Friend meetups became frequent but vague. Her phone, once casually left on countertops or coffee tables, now traveled with her even for brief trips to the laundry room. She installed a pattern lock on it, too many donors' private contacts, she explained with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. I told myself these changes meant nothing. Marriages evolve. People need privacy. My own work involved such high levels of confidentiality that I could hardly question her newfound discretion. Besides, confronting her would mean acknowledging my unease, giving substance to shadows I preferred to ignore. Instead, I retreated further into my work. My team had been tasked with hardening the defensive perimeters around several classified databases following a sophisticated attack attributed to foreign actors. The pressure was enormous. We were the last line of defense against state-sponsored hackers targeting America's most sensitive information. I spent days lost in lines of code, searching for vulnerabilities only the most persistent attackers might find. It was during one of these late-night sessions at home that I noticed something odd about our network traffic. I'd been running a diagnostic on our router, a routine maintenance check I performed monthly, when an anomalous pattern caught my attention. Someone on our home network was connecting to a high-security satellite relay node typically used by diplomatic or intelligence personnel. My first thought was that it must be related to my work VPN, but the timestamps didn't align with my usage. The connections occurred during afternoons when I was at the office, or late evenings when I was asleep. A chill settled over me as I dug deeper, tracing packets, analyzing protocols. This wasn't random. Someone was systematically using our home network to access a secure channel, the digital equivalent of finding strange footprints in your backyard. Professional instinct took over. I set up a packet capture system that would log all traffic through that particular channel without alerting the user. Then I waited, telling myself there must be a reasonable explanation. Perhaps Alina's gallery work involved higher security levels than she'd let on. Perhaps some automated system was malfunctioning. Perhaps I was seeing threats where none existed, an occupational hazard in my line of work. The truth arrived 3 days later, buried in encrypted packets I spent hours decoding. What I found first confused, then stunned, then hollowed me out completely: image files and text messages exchanged between Alina and someone identified only as AV. The content was a mixture of intimate personal exchanges and, far more disturbing, detailed references to classified projects I had been working on. Projects I had never discussed with my wife. Projects only someone with high-level security clearance should have known existed. I sat motionless before my monitor, the blue light illuminating a face I wouldn't have recognized in the mirror, ashen, slack with disbelief. The messages revealed not just an affair, but something infinitely worse. My wife was sharing information. My information. Security protocols I'd helped design. System weaknesses my team was addressing. In that moment, I should have felt rage. Betrayal. Heartbreak. Instead, a strange, cold clarity descended. This wasn't just about us anymore. This was about national security. And somehow, unwittingly, I had become the leak. My training kicked in. I documented everything methodically, securing copies of the evidence on encrypted drives. I traced the recipient's digital footprint as far as I could, hitting sophisticated barriers that only increased my suspicion. This was no civilian Alina was communicating with. This was someone with resources, expertise, and intent. As dawn broke over the capital, I stood at our bedroom window, watching Alina sleep. Her face in repose showed none of the strain of deception, peaceful, beautiful, utterly foreign to me now. Who was this woman I'd shared my life with for 9 years? Had any of it been real, or had I been selected, cultivated, used? The questions multiplied, but one certainty emerged: I couldn't confront her directly. Not yet. Too much was at stake. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. I needed to know who AV was, what information had been compromised, and how deep the security breach went. I showered and dressed as quietly as possible, selecting a nondescript suit that matched my usual workday appearance. Nothing in my demeanor could suggest that everything had changed. As I prepared to leave, Alina stirred. "You're up early," she murmured, her voice husky with sleep. "Big presentation today," I replied, surprised by how normal my voice sounded. "Thought I'd get a head start." She smiled, eyes still closed. "Knock 'em dead, honey." I stood frozen for a moment, wondering if she appreciated the irony of her encouragement. Then I forced a smile she couldn't see and left the room, my mind already racing ahead to what needed to be done. As I drove to work that morning, the familiar landmarks of Washington scrolled past like scenes from someone else's life. The Capitol dome gleamed in the distance, a symbol of the democracy I'd spent my career protecting. Now I had to face the possibility that I'd become its vulnerability, that the enemy had been sleeping beside me all along. My wife's betrayal had set in motion events that would transform me from an invisible guardian into a reluctant public figure. I just didn't know it yet. At that moment, I was simply Daniel Cross, cybersecurity analyst, processing the most devastating breach of my career and my heart simultaneously. The hunt for the truth, and the man known only as AV, had begun. The morning after discovering those encrypted messages, I arrived at my office earlier than usual. The defense contractor building stood like a fortress of glass and steel, its security protocols nearly as rigorous as the Pentagon itself. I badged through 3 separate checkpoints, submitted to a biometric scan, and finally reached my department's secure floor. No one questioned my presence at such an early hour. Dedication was expected in our line of work, especially with ongoing threats to our systems. My office was a windowless space dominated by multiple monitors and humming servers. I locked the door behind me, an unusual move that would raise eyebrows if anyone noticed, but I needed absolute privacy. What I was about to do walked a dangerous line between professional duty and potentially criminal invasion of privacy. I powered up my workstation and inserted the encrypted drive containing the evidence I had gathered overnight. First, I needed to identify AV. The messages between him and Alina contained no full name, no clear indication of nationality, though certain phrases suggested English wasn't his first language. I created a secure virtual machine, untraceable to my work credentials, and began searching for digital breadcrumbs. If this man was who I suspected, a foreign intelligence operative, his digital footprint would be carefully managed, but nobody moved through cyberspace without leaving traces. Hours passed as I followed electronic whispers through encrypted channels. My colleagues arrived, knocked occasionally with questions about our ongoing security project. I answered without leaving my seat, deflecting concerns with mentions of a complicated algorithm I was debugging. Meanwhile, my secondary screens continued the hunt. By mid-afternoon, I had assembled enough fragments to form a partial picture. Anton Volkov, 42, officially listed as an economic attaché with the Russian delegation. His diplomatic credentials provided perfect cover for regular appearances at Washington's cultural events. Including, I realized with growing nausea, the gallery exhibitions that Alina curated. I pulled up his official photograph from the embassy website. The man staring back had calculating eyes, a strong jawline, and the confident posture of someone accustomed to authority. I could imagine how he might appear charming, worldly, exciting to someone like Alina, who had increasingly expressed restlessness with our predictable life together. The true revelation came when I cross-referenced his appearances with certain security breaches our team had investigated over the past year. 5 separate incidents aligned perfectly with diplomatic functions Alina had attended, functions where Volkov had been present according to public photographs. The coincidence was too perfect. "Daniel, you okay?" My department head appeared at my door, startling me enough that I switched screens. "You've been holed up all day." "Just focused," I replied, attempting a casual tone while my heart hammered against my ribs. "Think I'm close to identifying that vulnerability in the Defense Network Communications Protocol?" He nodded approvingly. "Good man. The director wants an update tomorrow morning. Anything significant to report?" The irony of his question nearly pulled a bitter laugh from me. Significant? Only that I had unwittingly become the source of a major intelligence leak through my wife's betrayal. Only that the security systems I had devoted my career to protecting had been compromised because of my own blindness. "Nothing conclusive yet," I managed to say. "I'll have something solid by morning." After he left, I returned to my investigation with renewed urgency. The messages between Alina and Volkov included references to a meeting scheduled for tomorrow evening at Meridian, an upscale restaurant in Georgetown. They planned to exchange something. The details were deliberately vague, but I understood enough to recognize the significance. I needed proof beyond digital communications. I needed to witness their interaction firsthand, to confirm what I already knew in my gut. More importantly, I needed to determine exactly what information had been compromised through me. The question that haunted me as I drove home that evening wasn't about Alina's faithfulness. That illusion had already shattered. What tormented me was whether she had married me for love at all, or if our entire relationship had been an elaborate setup to gain access to my work. 9 years was an extraordinarily long game to play, even for Russian intelligence. Had there been genuine feelings at any point, or had I simply been a convenient target from the beginning? Alina greeted me at the door with a kiss on the cheek, as if nothing had changed between us. She wore a burgundy dress I had never seen before, elegant and clearly expensive. "There's a diplomatic reception tonight," she explained, noticing my gaze. "Last-minute addition to the calendar. I meant to text you earlier." I nodded, watching her apply lipstick in the hallway mirror. "Anyone interesting attending?" "The usual crowd," she replied dismissively. "Ministry officials, cultural attaches, wealthy donors who enjoy feeling important." Her casualness while lying directly to my face awakened something cold and resolute within me. In that moment, I made my decision. Tomorrow night, while Alina thought she was meeting her handler, she would instead face the consequences of her betrayal, both of our marriage and of national security. "Don't wait up," she called over her shoulder as she collected her clutch purse from the side table. "These things always run late." "I won't," I assured her, maintaining my facade of oblivious trust. "Have a good time." As the door closed behind her, I returned to my home office and began preparations for what would become the most important counterintelligence operation of my career. By tomorrow night, I would confront not just my wife's lover, but a foreign agent who had used my marriage as a weapon against my country. The Meridian restaurant gleamed with understated elegance, its Art Deco interior softly illuminated by vintage chandeliers. I arrived 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting time, selecting a corner table with a clear view of the entrance while remaining partially obscured by a decorative pillar. The maitre d' recognized me from previous anniversaries. Alina and I had celebrated here, an irony that tightened my throat as I requested a table for one. Earlier that day, I had executed the most difficult part of my plan, accessing Alina's phone while she showered. Years of cybersecurity work had prepared me for the technical challenge, but nothing had prepared me for the emotional impact of confirming my worst fears. Messages between her and Volkov detailed not just their relationship but specific classified information she had extracted from my work devices, conversations, and even photographs of documents I had mistakenly left visible. The level of calculated betrayal left me physically ill. I had cloned her SIM card, redirecting Volkov's communications to my phone. When he texted to confirm their meeting, I responded as Alina, maintaining her speech patterns and suggesting a slight change in arrival time to ensure I would confront him alone. The restaurant filled with the evening crowd of politicians, lobbyists, and diplomats that populated Washington's elite social circles. I sipped water, declining alcohol to keep my mind razor-sharp. My jacket pocket held a custom USB drive containing a sophisticated tracking program I had coded overnight, a masterpiece of subtle malware that would infiltrate Volkov's devices without triggering standard security protocols. At precisely 7:15, he entered. Anton Volkov moved with military precision disguised as casual confidence, scanning the room with a practiced eye while maintaining a pleasant expression. He wore an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that suggested European craftsmanship, his salt and pepper hair adding distinguished gravity to features that women would find attractive. I understood immediately why Alina had fallen under his influence. He exuded the worldliness and excitement that had gradually disappeared from our marriage. The host directed him toward the table I had reserved in Alina's name. Recognition flickered across his face when he saw me instead of my wife, quickly replaced by composed neutrality. "Mr. Cross," he greeted me without hesitation, extending his hand. "What an unexpected pleasure. I believe I was meeting your wife to discuss the upcoming exhibition." I stood, accepting his handshake with a firmness that surprised him. "Mr. Volkov. Please, join me. Alina sends her apologies, a last-minute conflict. She suggested I might fill in, given my interest in Russian art." The lie flowed easily, surprising me. Until yesterday, deception had never been my strong suit. Volkov hesitated fractionally before taking the seat across from me. "I wasn't aware you shared your wife's enthusiasm for our cultural heritage." "There are many things about me you might find surprising," I replied, maintaining eye contact. "Just as I've recently discovered surprising things about my wife's professional activities." The waiter approached, temporarily pausing our verbal chess match. Volkov ordered scotch with the confidence of a regular patron. I requested the same, though I had no intention of drinking it. When we were alone again, Volkov leaned forward slightly. "Daniel, may I call you Daniel? I sense this is not about art. Perhaps we should speak plainly." "An excellent suggestion," I responded, sliding my phone across the table to display intercepted messages between him and Alina. "Let's discuss how long you've been using my wife to access classified defense information." His expression remained impressively neutral, though I detected a momentary tightening around his eyes. These appear to be private conversations between friends. "Surely you don't suspect anything inappropriate? Friends who discuss penetration testing protocols for next-generation missile defense systems?" I kept my voice low, steady. "Friends who exchange encrypted files containing network architecture diagrams that only exist on secure servers?" Volkov's demeanor shifted subtly, reassessing me. "You seem upset, Daniel." "Understandable, but perhaps misguided. Alina and I share many interests beyond her marriage." "Including espionage?" A flash of something dangerous crossed his features before he recovered with a practiced smile. "What an American perspective, so binary, so dramatic. In my country, we see information sharing as a form of international diplomacy. Unofficial channels often prevent official conflicts." I reached into my pocket, placing a small thumb drive beside his untouched scotch. "Consider this a diplomatic offering, then. Technical specifications for the new surveillance countermeasures my team is implementing next month. Alina mentioned you were particularly interested in these." Volkov's eyes narrowed infinitesimally, assessing the risk. His training would tell him this could be a trap, but the potential intelligence value might outweigh his caution. I had counted on his professional ambition overriding his personal suspicion. "You surprise me, Mr. Cross," he said finally, pocketing the drive with practiced casualness. "Perhaps I misjudged your commitment to your country's interests." "Perhaps everyone has," I replied, standing to signal our conversation had ended. "Tell Alina not to wait up tonight. I have some rather important calls to make." As I walked away, leaving him with the bill and the malware now residing in his pocket, I felt no triumph, only a hollow certainty that the next 24 hours would forever alter the course of my life. Morning arrived with the harsh clarity that follows life-altering decisions. I had not returned home after the confrontation with Volkov, choosing instead to check into an anonymous hotel using cash and a level of caution that would have seemed paranoid just days earlier. The tracking program embedded in the thumb drive had already activated, sending encrypted data packets to a secure server I had established. Anton had taken the bait completely, connecting the drive to his laptop within hours of our meeting. The FBI agents assigned to cybersecurity threats met me in a nondescript office building several blocks from their headquarters. Agent Simmons, a veteran counterintelligence specialist with prematurely gray hair and perpetually suspicious eyes, listened without interruption as I presented the evidence I had compiled, the intercepted communications, the classified information that had been compromised, the tracking data showing Volkov's digital activities following our restaurant encounter. "You should have come to us immediately," Simmons said after reviewing my documentation. His tone carried more professional disappointment than anger. Confronting a suspected foreign operative without backup was extraordinarily dangerous. "I needed conclusive proof," I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "And I needed to understand my wife's involvement before bringing this forward." The second agent, Chen, typed rapidly on her laptop. "The malware you deployed is impressively sophisticated. We're already receiving valuable intelligence on Volkov's network connections." She looked up with reluctant admiration. Though I should emphasize that civilian-initiated counterintelligence operations are generally frowned upon. "What happens now?" I asked, the reality of my situation finally settling into my consciousness like sediment after a storm. "To Alina, to Volkov, to me?" Simmons and Chen exchanged practiced glances, the silent communication of partners accustomed to delivering complicated news. "We'll bring them both in for questioning, though through different channels to prevent coordination. Volkov has diplomatic immunity, so ultimately he'll likely be declared persona non grata and expelled from the country. Your wife faces more serious consequences, potentially espionage charges depending on her level of willing participation." The clinical description of Alina's potential imprisonment struck me with unexpected force. Despite her betrayal, some stubborn part of me still recoiled at the thought of her in federal custody. And what about my role in all this? I was the security vulnerability. "Technically, you could face administrative penalties for failing to report suspicious behavior immediately," Chen acknowledged. "But considering you've uncovered and helped neutralize an active intelligence threat, the Justice Department will likely view you as a whistleblower rather than an accomplice." The conversation continued for hours, detailed statements recorded and evidence catalogued. By mid-afternoon, a carefully orchestrated operation was underway. FBI cybersecurity specialists had taken over monitoring the tracking program. Surveillance teams positioned themselves near our home and Volkov's hotel. I remained in a secure location, simultaneously protected asset and potential suspect. Through my secured government laptop, I watched the operation unfold with clinical detachment. Surveillance footage showed Alina returning home, moving through our living room with the casual confidence of someone whose secrets remain safe. The timestamp on the corner of the screen matched the moment agents approached our front door. The footage lacked audio, but I could read the shock on her face when she opened the door to badges and warrants instead of her husband. Simultaneously, at the Russian embassy's diplomatic residence, another team intercepted Volkov as he attempted to leave for a scheduled cultural event. The international diplomatic implications were already triggering urgent communications between Washington and Moscow, though I was permitted only limited access to those developments. Agent Simmons returned to the secure room where I waited, his expression betraying nothing. "Your wife is requesting to speak with you." Obviously, we advise against direct contact at this stage. "What did she say when confronted with the evidence?" The question escaped before I could contain it, some masochistic need to understand compelling me forward. "She claimed the relationship with Volkov was genuine, not professionally motivated," Simmons replied carefully. "She insists she didn't realize the full implications of the information she was sharing. Says she was manipulated." The familiar justification ignited something bitter within me. And her explanation for accessing my secure files? For photographing classified documents? Was she manipulated into learning my passwords and security protocols as well? Simmons offered no judgment, simply noting my response for the record. "The investigation will establish the facts. Meanwhile, we need to discuss your protection going forward. Once this operation becomes public, and it will, given the diplomatic implications, your identity will be difficult to conceal completely." The reality of my new circumstances crystallized in that antiseptic government office. My marriage was over, my career irreparably altered, my privacy forfeit to the machinery of national security. Yet alongside these losses emerged something unexpected, a newfound sense of purpose, even pride. I had faced betrayal not with emotional collapse but with strategic thinking that had potentially safeguarded vital national interests. I understand, I told Simmons, straightening in my chair with resolve. Whatever happens next, I'm prepared to cooperate fully. As night fell over Washington, intelligence analysts continued processing the data harvested from Volkov's compromised devices. News agencies received carefully crafted statements about ongoing counterintelligence operations involving diplomatic personnel. And somewhere in a federal holding facility, Alina waited, perhaps finally understanding that her betrayal had transformed me from an invisible analyst into someone far more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose and a country to protect. 2 weeks had passed since the arrests. Volkov remained in diplomatic limbo while negotiations between governments determined his fate. Alina, however, faced the full weight of the American justice system, charged with espionage and betrayal of national security interests. My reluctance to see her had gradually transformed into resolve. Questions lingered that only she could answer, wounds that required closure before I could fully move forward. Agent Simmons accompanied me through multiple security checkpoints, his presence both procedural and supportive. Remember, this conversation will be recorded and monitored, he reminded me as we approached the interview room. She's been cooperative during questioning, but that doesn't mean she'll be truthful with you. Her legal situation remains precarious. I nodded, steeling myself for what awaited beyond the heavy metal door. I understand. This isn't about the case anymore. It's personal. 15 minutes, Simmons said, gesturing for the guard to unlock the door. If you need to end it sooner, just signal. The woman who waited inside barely resembled the Alina I had married. Her elegant wardrobe had been replaced by standard-issue detention clothing, her carefully maintained appearance stripped to essentials. Without makeup, under harsh fluorescent lighting, she looked simultaneously younger and more worn, vulnerability and calculation warring in her expression as I entered. Daniel. My name emerged as a whisper from her lips. I wasn't sure you would come. I took the seat across from her, the metal table between us symbolic of all that now separated us. I needed answers that weren't in the official reports. Her hands, resting on the table, showed chipped nail polish, a detail that struck me with unexpected poignancy. Alina had always maintained impeccable grooming. The small imperfection somehow humanized her more than anything else. Ask them, she said simply. I have nothing left to hide. The question that had tormented me surfaced immediately. Was any of it real? Our marriage, was it ever genuine, or was I just an assignment from the beginning? Her eyes met mine directly, perhaps the first truly honest gaze we had shared in years. It wasn't supposed to be real. When we met at that cybersecurity conference, you were a target of opportunity, young, brilliant, lonely, with promising career prospects in defense infrastructure. I was supposed to establish contact, develop a relationship, gather information. Standard procedure. And then? Then I actually fell in love with you. A sad smile flickered across her face. It wasn't part of the plan. My handlers were delighted, of course, marriage provided perfect cover and access. But for several years, I compartmentalized. Our home life was separate from my other obligations. Until it wasn't, I observed, keeping my tone neutral despite the ache spreading through my chest. Alina looked down at her hands. Anton reactivated me 3 years ago. He said it was too valuable a position to waste on conventional living. He made me remember my loyalties, my oaths. She hesitated. And eventually, he made me remember what excitement felt like. The admission stung despite its predictability. So you chose espionage and adultery over our marriage. I chose purpose over comfort, she corrected gently. You had your mission, Daniel, protecting systems, building digital fortresses. I had mine. The difference was, you got to serve your country openly while living your authentic life. I had to hide half of who I was. You betrayed everything I believed in, I said, controlling the tremor in my voice. You compromised national security. People could have died because of information you stole. Alina leaned forward. We both served causes bigger than ourselves. You call it betrayal. Others would call it patriotism, just for a different flag. The practiced justification revealed how thoroughly she had rationalized her actions. Perhaps that explained her seeming lack of remorse. In her mind, she had merely been following her own moral compass, however misaligned with mine. What happens now? I asked, suddenly exhausted by the ethical debate neither of us would win. My cooperation has secured certain considerations, she replied with pragmatic calm. I'll serve time, but eventually there might be an exchange. These situations follow predictable patterns. As our allotted time neared its end, Alina reached into the pocket of her facility-issued clothing and withdrew a folded paper. They allowed me to draw. I was never as talented as I pretended to be for gallery clients, but... She pushed it across the table. I unfolded it to find a sketch, clearly done from memory with limited materials. It showed me standing at a podium, cameras flashing around me, my posture straight and confident, nothing like the man who had lived in the shadows of government servers for years. What is this? I asked, confused by the image. Alina's smile contained genuine warmth mixed with something like pride. Your future. You always wanted to matter, Daniel. To make a difference beyond your keyboard. Now you will. The guard opened the door, signaling our time had ended. I stood, refolding the drawing carefully. Goodbye, Alina. Goodbye, Daniel, she responded, her composure finally cracking slightly. For what it's worth, loving you was never part of my assignment. It was the one true thing in a life built on falsehoods. I walked away without looking back, her final words echoing in my mind. Outside, Agent Simmons waited, his questioning expression requiring no words. I have what I needed, I told him, pocketing Alina's drawing. She's part of my past now. Whatever comes next, I'm ready. 6 months after the arrests, I stood at the podium in the National Press Club, cameras flashing just as Alina had drawn in her prescient sketch. My memoir, Digital Deception: How America's Enemies Weaponize Trust, had topped bestseller lists for 8 consecutive weeks. The audience before me included journalists, government officials, cybersecurity professionals, and intelligence analysts, a room full of people who once would have intimidated me into silence but now hung on my every word. The transformation from anonymous government contractor to public security advocate had not been planned. Initially, I had expected to fade back into obscurity after the investigation concluded, perhaps with a different agency and certainly with enhanced security protocols. Instead, the Justice Department had approached me with an unexpected proposal: become the public face of a new cybersecurity awareness initiative aimed at both government personnel and private citizens. They needed someone who understood the technical complexities but could also speak to the human vulnerabilities that no firewall could protect against. The most sophisticated security system ever designed can be compromised by human emotions, I explained to the audience, my voice steady despite the bright lights and recording devices. We invest billions in technological safeguards while neglecting the most critical vulnerability, ourselves. Our trust, our connections, our desire to believe in the people closest to us, these human elements remain the preferred attack vector for those who wish us harm. The trial had concluded 3 months earlier. Anton Volkov had indeed been traded in a diplomatic exchange, returned to Russia where intelligence sources suggested he had been reassigned to a less prestigious position, the standard outcome for operatives whose cover is blown. Alina had received a 15-year sentence at a medium-security federal facility after pleading guilty to reduced charges in exchange for comprehensive cooperation with counterintelligence officials. I had visited her only once more after our initial conversation. She had seemed smaller somehow, resigned to her circumstances yet still maintaining that core of inner strength that had first attracted me years ago. We had spoken briefly about practical matters, the sale of our home, the division of personal belongings, the final dissolution of the life we had built together. As I prepared to leave, she had asked about the book, having seen news of its forthcoming publication. Will you portray me as a monster? Her question had contained no self-pity, only genuine curiosity. I'll portray you as human, I had replied. Complicated, flawed, capable of both love and betrayal. Like all of us. She had nodded, apparently satisfied with this answer. We had parted without dramatic declarations or promises of continued connection. Some chapters simply end, allowing new ones to begin. The question and answer portion of my presentation brought me back to the present moment. A young cybersecurity analyst from a private firm raised her hand. After everything you experienced, how do you trust anyone again? Professionally or personally? The room quieted, recognizing the question extended beyond technical solutions into the realm of human resilience. I considered my response carefully, conscious of the recording devices capturing my words for broader distribution. Trust isn't binary, all or nothing. It exists on a spectrum, evolving through verification and experience. What I learned wasn't to stop trusting, but to trust appropriately, to understand that different relationships require different levels of verification. My experience taught me to balance healthy skepticism with necessary vulnerability. Without trust, we lose our humanity. Without verification, we lose our security. Finding the balance between them is our ongoing challenge. As the session concluded, Senator Harrington, chair of the Intelligence Committee, approached me privately. The President is establishing a civilian advisory council on emerging cybersecurity threats. Your perspective would be valuable, especially regarding the human factors we often overlook. This invitation represented the culmination of an unexpected journey from betrayed husband to national security resource, precisely the transformation Alina had predicted in her sketch. Perhaps she had recognized something in me that I had not yet seen in myself, the potential to emerge stronger from devastation, to transform personal pain into public purpose. Later that evening, alone in my new apartment overlooking the Potomac, I unpacked another box of books from my former home. Among them, I discovered a volume of Russian poetry Alina had given me years ago, inscribed with words I had never fully understood until now. To see clearly through betrayal is to find your true strength. My phone buzzed with another interview request, another speaking engagement, another opportunity to share the lessons learned through personal devastation. The nation now viewed me as a hero of sorts, the man who had uncovered espionage through personal vigilance, who had placed country above heartbreak. The truth, as always, contained more complexity than the public narrative suggested. My actions had stemmed not from patriotic fervor but from the primal need to understand how thoroughly I had been deceived. The irony remained inescapable. My wife's betrayal had indeed made me a national hero, transforming an invisible analyst into a public advocate for vigilance and verification. As I accepted the next call, I embraced the strange new reality my life had become a man defined not by what he had lost, but by what he had discovered within himself when everything else was taken away.